Eva Braun was Hitler's lover. He kept their relationship a secret from the German people.
And Nazi insiders gave jaw-dropping accounts of how and why these women died.
Something very, very traumatic was being done to her at that time.
Was suicide.
Right behind the man who led one of the most devastating regimes of the 20th century, Adolf Hitler, was a woman named Eva Braun. When the war ended, she chose to die beside him as the country she believed in collapsed. For decades, her final thoughts remained unknown, but her sister has now revealed why. Through letters written in Eva's final hours, we see what she was really thinking before she chose death, and the truth isn't good. Gretle Braun, the younger sister of Eva Braun, lived most of her life in the shadow of history. She quietly observed the events that surrounded one of the most infamous figures of the 20th century. Born into a modest Bavarian family, Gretel was intimately connected to the inner circle of the Nazi regime through her sister's relationship with Adolf Hitler. Hitler even helped her, getting her a marriage to SS officer Hermann Fegelein. Despite the close ties, she remained largely invisible in the historical record and was a silent witness to the final days of the Third Reich. Although Gretel was in the midst of the power and fear of the Second World War, she escaped the fate that her sister faced, which was death. Eva Braun's story was a tragic one of personal and political entanglement. After years as Hitler's companion, she married him in a brief ceremony during the final days of April 1945, as Berlin was under siege and the Nazi regime teetered on the edge of collapse. Less than 24 hours later, Eva committed suicide alongside Hitler in the Führer bunker, sealing both their fates and the end of the Third Reich. History has always recorded this as an act of loyalty or romantic devotion, but Eva Braun's mystery is finally solved after all these years by her sister. Gretel has revealed that Eva was feeling more fear, isolation, and resignation than love and courage. The most important thing revealed by Gretel is the last letter Eva wrote to her sister in the final moments. This correspondence, received just days before Eva's death, revealed a remarkable composure and calm. Eva's tone was quiet and resigned, with no panic or pleading. In her letter, she warned Gretel to destroy sensitive documents that could endanger lives or reveal secrets, but allowed her sister to keep personal correspondence like that one. These letters were the fragile threads of connection amidst the world of chaos. What Gretel always remembered was not just what Eva wrote, but what she didn't write. Eva didn't write a plan of escape, a cry for help, or a faint glimmer of hope. Instead, it seemed like Eva was resigned to her fate and had surrendered to the circumstances of the bunker. Later on, in interviews, Gretel revealed through tears that the sister she had loved so dearly faced death directly and chose to make a stand, even if that stand was one of resignation. Eva Braun was only 33 years old when she passed away. She had once been vibrant, with a life that should have extended far beyond the confines of a war-torn Berlin. She could have left Hitler behind and gone with her sister to live beyond the war. Instead, she returned to the bunker and to Hitler, to the cold, underground tomb that awaited her. Gretel struggled to understand this decision, asking herself why anyone would choose death when survival remained possible. She never found an answer, as her sister had already passed away. After the war, Gretle Braun's world completely changed, and her sister was gone. The Third Reich lay in ruins, with its banners torn down, and its leaders were either dead, imprisoned, or in hiding. But she kept her sister's letter a secret for many years, until later, when she finally revealed Eva Braun's mystery. Even worse, a doctor who was in the bunker at the time of the suicide has revealed something shocking. Was Eva Braun's suicide really her choice? A doctor who was present during the final days of the Third Reich has provided a compelling perspective that challenges what we've always known about Eva Braun's death. According to him, Eva didn't actively choose death in the Führer bunker out of loyalty, devotion, or romantic idealism. Instead, she was trapped within a psychologically suffocating environment. Basically, she was afraid of leaving and stepping into a world where the Nazi regime had disappeared. These conditions made her feel like it was impossible for her to survive. Later on, the doctor visited Gretle Braun while she was pregnant and revealed secrets about what he saw while he was in that bunker. He revealed that the last hours in the bunker were dominated by confusion, mental deterioration, and a sense of fear instead of courage and defiance, as the historians say. Hitler himself had become a broken and incoherent figure, shouting, punching walls, and lashing out. After all of this, he succumbed to the recognition of his failure and decided to take his life. As for Eva, she was terrified of living a life without Hitler and Nazi Germany, and so decided to leave with him. Even if the doctor had said this, many experts and historians have long believed that Eva Braun actively chose to die. After all, she stayed by Hitler's side even when others, including her sister, were running away from Germany. Also, she got married to Hitler in the final hours of their death, despite the fact that the Reich was already collapsing. There's no evidence showing that she was coerced or forced to have such a tragic ending with Hitler. From this perspective, Eva's actions were intentional, as she had accepted her fate and decided to stay loyal to Hitler until the end. So imagine how shocked the world was when Eva Braun's mystery was finally solved, and Gretel revealed what the doctor said. He described Eva's final hours as being dominated by fear and not a desire to end her life. She spent the time sobbing, fully aware she would never leave the bunker again, and that she would never see her sister Gretel again. The doctor suggested that her act of biting the cyanide capsule might not have been an autonomous decision, but instead, it could have been influenced by the psychological pressure of the bunker or by Hitler himself. The bunker was a tomb long before they actually committed suicide, and Eva was caught in a suffocating environment that left her with no other options. Gretel also agreed with the doctor after reading Eva's final letters to her. She confirmed that her sister's last days were marked by intense emotional and psychological pressure, with a mix of fear, despair, and resignation. While Gretel and Eva stayed in Nazi Germany, Eva supported Hitler, while Gretel found herself gradually exposed to Nazi power, but not enough for her to stay behind and die in a bunker. Gretle Braun's exposure to Nazi power started long before the Third Reich collapsed, although the world was mostly focused on her older sister, Eva. Eva's relationship with Hitler has always been public, while Gretel's story remained largely hidden. For a brief moment, she even held the title of Hitler's sister-in-law. This status lasted barely 2 days before the final catastrophe engulfed Nazi Germany. Although this was fleeting, it placed her dangerously close to the center of power during one of history's darkest chapters. Gretel was never inside the Führer bunker in the final days, and she didn't fight on the battlefields where the Reich met her violent end. But she was still intertwined with the regime's most intimate spaces. Raised in a modest Bavarian family, she watched as her sister Eva was drawn into Hitler's orbit, slowly becoming inseparable from the man that eventually defined evil in the 20th century. As Eva's relationship deepened, Gretel's youth was affected. She ended up visiting Hitler's mountain retreats and attending gatherings with propaganda. These early years caused Gretel to be exposed to Nazi prestige and propaganda. Heinrich Hoffmann, Hitler's official photographer, played a key role in embedding the Braun sisters into the regime's visual narrative. Gretel appeared in the background of staged photographs and formal events, part of a carefully curated illusion that masked the brutality behind the scenes. Though she was not a political actor, her presence helped humanize a regime built on terror. Hitler did not view her as insignificant. On the contrary, he took a direct interest in her life, treating her as a piece within his personal and political strategy. In fact, Hitler was very interested in Gretel's private world. He took care of her living arrangements, ensuring she remained physically close to Eva, and attempted to control her choice of husband just to serve his broadening interest. His control became worse when, in 1944, as Germany's military situation deteriorated, he told her to get married to Hermann Fegelein, an ambitious and ruthless SS Gruppenführer. The wedding itself was a grand spectacle, attended by figures such as Heinrich Himmler and Martin Bormann, with Hitler personally giving his blessing. But beneath the surface, there was a lot of uncertainty and fear in Nazi Germany. Cities burned, armies collapsed, and the Soviet advance closed in on Berlin. Gretel, like the many others in Hitler's circle, was shielded from the intensity of the war and continued to believe in the regime's endurance. Gretel didn't realize that her sister was nearing her end, but she did notice that she had changed a lot as the war was coming to an end. As the war came to an end, Gretle Braun started to notice that there were some changes in the life of her sister, Eva. The lively social atmosphere that once surrounded Eva started to fade away, and it was replaced by silence, tension, and emotional withdrawal. Eva's home used to be full of card games, shared cigarettes, garden walks, and polite laughter. Gretel then noticed that Eva was no longer fully present in her surroundings. The long walks they once took together became quiet, and laughter was more forced. When Gretel looked at Berghof, where she and her sister had been living, it had changed a lot. It was once a place of staged glamour that hosted generals, diplomats, and artists, but it quickly became dark and hollow by 1944. Gretel quickly noticed that Eva spent more time staring out of windows and waiting for letters, reassurance, and Hitler's attention. Her emotional world had narrowed, and she had become more dependent on Hitler as he lost his territory. Family dynamics shifted under the weight of collapse. Although Eva remained outwardly composed, Gretel could sense her sister retreating inward. Eva was no longer the confident companion of earlier years, but someone burdened by uncertainty and fear. The women around Hitler, including Eva and Gretel, were never decision-makers. They were expected to provide an illusion of normalcy, beauty, and calm, while the real business of war unfolded elsewhere. As conditions worsened, even that illusion became impossible to maintain. Eva's withdrawal reflected not only her personal despair, but also the crumbling structure around her. Despite how grand Gretel's wedding was to Hermann Fegelein in 1944, the Nazi regime was quickly deteriorating. The ceremony was attended by high-ranking officials and blessed by Hitler himself. But a few months later, the cities were burning, armies were collapsing, and the Soviet forces were closing in on Berlin. Yet Gretel and other people in Hitler's inner circle had no idea about what was happening in the outside world. She was shielded from the full truth. Information was controlled, softened, or withheld. She held on to the belief that the regime might overcome, but didn't know it was about to be destroyed. But it seemed like Eva was sensing the inevitable. Gretel noticed that her sister became very emotionally close as the end approached. Eva spoke less and kept waiting for circumstances that were about to happen. But Gretel didn't realize that she would have such a tragic and sudden ending and decided to leave the war-torn region. When Gretel finally left the Berghof in early 1945, pregnant and disillusioned, she never returned. Eva remained behind, withdrawn and resigned, as the world she had built her life around collapsed. But historians have been asking, what happened to Gretle Braun's life after she left Eva behind and went to another country? After all, Eva Braun made the decision to stay and pass away with Hitler, while Gretel decided to leave. So, what exactly happened to her after leaving? After leaving her sister behind, in the collapsing Third Reich in 1945, Gretle Braun's life took a dramatic turn. She was pregnant and highly aware that the world she had known was collapsing. So she removed herself from the inner circle of Nazi power and left without fanfare. At the same time, her husband, Hermann Fegelein, made his own desperate choice. As the Third Reich unraveled and Soviet forces closed in on the capital, Fegelein abandoned his post and tried to escape from Berlin in secret. He disguised himself in civilian clothes and carried a lot of valuables as he tried to run away from the city, but his disappearance didn't go unnoticed. Shockingly, reports of his desertion reached Hitler in the bunker, where the dictator was already breaking down with paranoia and rage. For Hitler, in that moment, Fegelein's choice was an unforgivable betrayal. He quickly gave orders for him to be found and killed, without ceremony. There were no official records, marked grave, or body returned to Gretel. All she knew was that her husband had died. Gretel learned of her husband's execution while she was heavily pregnant and isolated from the chaos consuming Berlin. She was far from the bunker, yet bound to its consequences by blood and marriage. On May 5, 1945, just days after Hitler and Eva Braun died, Gretel gave birth to her daughter at the Berghof. But everywhere was now silent and abandoned. The Reich had fallen, her sister was dead, and her husband was gone. She named her child Eva Barbara, honoring the sister she had lost. The birth was the beginning of a new life, and Gretel was determined to survive. She kept her head down for years, but after a long time, she decided to solve Eva Braun's mystery once and for all. After the collapse of Nazi Germany, Gretle Braun managed to carve out a life away from the chaos and notoriety that Hitler had created. She had close ties to Adolf Hitler because of her sister Eva and was married to Fegelein, but she managed to survive World War II nearly unscathed and chose a life of anonymity. In the closing days of the war, Gretel was still at the Berghof, heavily pregnant, when news came of her husband's arrest and execution for desertion. Hitler had originally planned to send Fegelein to defend Berlin, but when he heard of Himmler's negotiations with the Allies, he shot him instead. 2 days later, Eva and Hitler died by suicide in the Führerbunker, cutting off any connection that Gretel had to the Nazi leadership. Just after Berlin fell and the Third Reich no longer existed, she gave birth to her daughter. With the war over, Gretel was in a world that was hostile to everything her former life represented. To escape the stigma attached to her roots, she deliberately withdrew from public life. She changed her surname and relocated within Bavaria, ensuring that no one would find out that she was connected to Hitler or the SS. In 1954, Gretel remarried, this time to Kurt Berlinghoff, a Munich businessman. The marriage marked a new chapter, allowing her to forge a domestic life distant from the political tumult of her path. Her daughter also took on a new surname and was raised largely outside the historical spotlight. During these years, she changed her residence multiple times, maintained a minimal public presence, and avoided any interviews or memoirs that would expose her. But the shadow of history touched her family again when her daughter, Eva Barbara, died by suicide in 1971 after a devastating personal loss. After that happened, Gretel decided to give a few interviews, revealing secrets about Hitler's childhood and her sister's state of mind in the bunker where she eventually passed away. She continued to live quietly, living out her days largely removed from public view, until her own death in 1987 in Steingarten, Bavaria, at the age of 72. On her tombstone, she is identified by her married name, Gretel Berlinghoff, emphasizing the life she chose after the war. But even if she had passed away, the mystery of her sister continued to unravel. And imagine the shock when the world found out the truth about Eva Braun's ancestry. Eva Braun's ancestry has always been a subject of speculation, and recently, experts revealed that there's a good chance she had Jewish roots. If that's true, that's a major contradiction to everything that Hitler believed in and built during the war. Born in Munich in 1912, Eva Braun lived much of her life in a German Catholic family, the daughter of Franziska Kronberger and Friedrich Braun. She met Adolf Hitler through the studio of photographer Heinrich Hoffmann in 1929, when she was a young woman and Hitler a rising political figure. Their relationship developed privately for many years, in part because Hitler was conscious of his public image and kept Eva largely out of the political spotlight. Although Hitler was obsessed with racial purity and the Nazi ideology of Aryan supremacy, he continued having a relationship with Eva. So, Hitler's private secretary, Martin Bormann, investigated her background when the relationship was getting serious to make sure she didn't have Jewish ancestry. This was a standard practice within the Nazi regime. After the inquiry, they concluded that she was of pure descent, but years later, scientists are saying that that might not be the case. In 2014, a British television documentary shocked the world when they revealed that the DNA extracted from hair samples that belonged to Braun indicates a Jewish ancestry. Scientists involved found a mitochondrial DNA sequence called haplogroup N1b1, which is strongly associated with Ashkenazi Jews. Since mitochondrial DNA is passed down the maternal line, this means that someone in Eva's maternal lineage was Jewish. But there were some problems with these findings. The DNA came from hair that was meant to be Eva's, but it was burned and kept for many decades, which means that there might be contamination or misattribution, making it hard to conclude. Experts tried to get DNA from Eva's living female descendants to confirm the sample, but they refused. Still, there's a high chance that Eva was Jewish, and Hitler was in love with someone from the race he hated the most. Ashkenazi Jews in Germany in the 19th century converted to Catholicism or assimilated into the broader population. So, Eva might not have been aware of her distant Jewish ancestry, talk less of Hitler. But the mystery continues to deepen, as experts are looking into Eva Braun's roles in the Nazi crimes. After all, a woman following Hitler, one of the most terrifying men of his time, must have been involved in his gruesome crimes. Investigating Eva Braun's mysteries cannot be understood without looking at her role in the Nazi regime. Although she wasn't involved in politics, she lived and thrived at the center of some of history's greatest atrocities, and that tied her to a regime responsible for unimaginable suffering. Within a few years from when Eva met Hitler, she became his mistress and was soon taken away from public sight. Despite her proximity to power, she was never involved in decision-making or formal Nazi institutions. She did not hold office, did not craft policy, and was never a member of the Nazi Party. In that sense, she was not directly involved in the crimes of the Third Reich, but the separation from politics was more because of image management. Hitler was very concerned with public perception. His public image was that he was devoted to Germany and not to any woman, so he kept her hidden from the public for most of the regime. They hardly ever appeared in public, but there's a photo of them from the 1936 Winter Olympics. Privately, however, Braun benefited enormously from being Hitler's companion. She lived in residences provided by him, including a villa in Munich and the Berghof mountain retreat in Berchtesgaden, where she enjoyed comforts and leisure most Germans could not have imagined during wartime. Her days were filled with photography, films, sunbathing, and social gatherings attended by Nazi elites. These settings reinforced the social network around Hitler, allowing her to live a cozy and normal life in a brutal regime where many were suffering. Although she was never a policymaker, historians believe that she knew and understood more than she might have thought. She wasn't a passive bystander, but a believer and sympathizer who supported Hitler with loyalty, so much so that she decided to die with him at the end of it all. Eva Braun's mystery has finally been solved by no one else but her sister, who lived close enough to see her life unravel. Do you agree with the doctor who said Eva didn't want to die, or the historians who said she was loyal enough to want to? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. So, thanks for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.